Listen, I love church camp. I know I said this last year when I was talking about Camp Sunday, but I started to just kind of add up as best that I could the years that I've been to camp just as an adult. I couldn't go back far enough to remember all the times that I went as a kid, and I know I didn't go every year because I didn't always love church camp. Sometimes I know it was a fight to get me there. And when I finally went, I enjoyed it. I know over the 40 years of my life, I've been to church camp as an adult 45 times. 17 times basketball camp, multiple times Summer in the Sun, multiple times CIY, and sprinkle in all kinds of different times. And again, that doesn't even include the times that I've went as a kid. And I think I could safely say this, there's not a lot that I know about in life, but I'm learning a lot about church camp after spending that many weeks at church camp. But I don't want to tell you what I've learned over the years. I want to tell you what I learned this year at church camp. I learned that your kids do not have a future as a winning contestant on Jeopardy. Right? They're not very good at Jeopardy. It is what it is. Okay, embrace it now. Don't plan on that being your retirement for your kids winning Jeopardy. I learned that if there is an object in the water that a student can climb on and jump off of, that they will do so. I learned that if there's a way to get on the roof of a building, that you will find a student just laying on that roof. I learned that my lovely wife, although for the past 17 years of marriage has claimed to not be competitive, absolutely hates losing in card games to Brad and I. You can ask her about it, she's still bitter. I learned that if you put our kids in an escape room and lock the doors, they will never get out. I learned that if you give youth bandanas, they will become weapons. I learned that we have some artists in our group. One of our activities was a paint and sip. The sipping was milkshakes, okay? And one of our activities was a paint and sip, and our theme, if you haven't figured it out yet, was Made for More. And so we put their pictures up here. One of the things that I desperately want you to do, and I wrote about this in my bulletin article, the kids who went to camp with us and went to any camp this summer, I want you to ask them about camp. But don't ask them generic questions, because if you say, what was your favorite memory of camp, they're going to tell you, they probably forget, or they're going to tell you something. Ask what God is doing in their life and what they learned, and how God is just speaking to them at camp. I learned that it's not uncommon for Doritos to end up in the shower. There's a video, but I wasn't going to play it this morning. I learned that our kids love to get behind a microphone and to sing. Even if they're off key or out of time, they love to sing. I learned that our teens, who are like most teens, desire to be cool and accepted. Our teens desire to grow and to learn. I learned that our youth are not ashamed to worship. And I learned that our teens are learning that they are made for more than what this world has to offer. I wanted to do this as soon as I got up here, but I forgot. If you went to any camp this year, whether it was our camp, the teen camp that we just put on and you saw the videos from, or Round Lake, or another Wakatomica, and I'm talking not just students, but adults as well, because a lot of you came up and cooked for us and helped or dropped stuff off that we forgot. If you went to camp at all this summer, stand up just real quick. Awesome. Cool, you can grab a seat. I wanted them to stand up because, again, I want you to ask them questions. I want you to ask what it is that, favorite memories from camp, but more than that, specific questions about what God is doing in their lives and was doing then and is doing now. I told you guys this a few months ago. I preached, and I preached actually on this topic of Made for More. And I told you this is our kind of our unofficial theme for the year for our teens. We started out in the beginning of January and we hit on this hard, and then we just sprinkled this topic in throughout just this first half of the year. And then when camp rolled around, this was our theme. We brought in speakers for camp. We brought in a man by the name of Jason Hankinson, who's a minister at the Danville Church of Christ, and he came in on Friday morning and spoke, and then turned around and came back on Saturday morning and spoke. We had 3 main sessions, and this year we brought in people that our kids would know. We brought in my brother who came in on Friday night, and he challenged our kids. And then Sam came and spoke to our students on Saturday night. And then Joel spoke to our students on Sunday morning. I should have put this in there, but I also learned this. Like, Joel has he has a list of important things in his life. It goes God, it goes family, and then fireworks. Right? God, family, and fireworks. And if fireworks went off at camp, I'm not going to admit that if they did or not, but if they did, Joel was the one that had something to do with that. What we like to do during Camp Sunday is we like to just give you a glimpse of what we dealt with. And Jason Hankinson came and he taught a class on Friday morning and again on Saturday morning. And one of the things that he said in his class, he said there are 2 things that I cannot stand hearing at church. And he said they're kind of 2 of his pet peeves. And one of the 2, and this is what we're going to talk about this morning, he said, I hate it when people say, any of our camp teens remember what he said? What were the 2? Does anybody remember the 2? What one do you remember? That's just the way they are. That's the only one I could remember too. I didn't write the other one down. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. He said, I absolutely cannot stand it when people, do you remember the other one? What's the other one? They're just kids. All right. We're not going to talk about that one today because I didn't prepare for that one today. He said, I cannot stand it when people look at us or look at somebody else and just say, hey, that's just the way they are. I remember when I was interviewing to be the youth minister at the East 40 Church of Christ. It was March of 2007, and I remember a lot about this. It wasn't the first interview; it was the second interview, and it was more of just a dinner with the senior minister and his wife, Kenny and Amy. And Rachel and I went, and we met them. And there used to be, I think there used to be a restaurant in one of the hotels over on Airport Exit, and we met there. And what I remember most was, number one, it was March, and of course it was 2007. Now I don't expect anybody to remember who was good in basketball in March of 2007. It was the Buckeyes, right? Buckeyes were one of the top, or they were one of the 4 1 seeds in March Madness. They had a great team that year with Greg Oden and Michael Conley, Mike Conley. It just didn't sound right when I said it. But here's what I remember most. They sat Rachel and I in a seat at this interview with the Buckeyes playing the Georgetown Hoyas. And I had to sit through an interview without looking up to watch the game the entire time. And I still remember that. I remember a lot of that, and actually I remember, and they knew that I liked basketball, and I think they did it on purpose. And I remember them making a comment towards the end of that dinner, like, "Hey, you've barely even paid any attention to the game." And I think I was just sweating the entire time because I was trying so hard not to look up. But more than that, what I remember during that interview, we were almost done, and Amy looked at Kenny and she said, "Hey, can I tell them about so and so?" And I'm not going to say any names because we're not very far away from the East 40 Church of Christ. And she said, can I warn them about so-and-so? And for the next few minutes, and she wasn't bad-mouthing this person, she just was starting to warn us, like, hey, if this is where you guys are going to serve, you just need to understand there's somebody in this congregation that's very difficult. And she finished that conversation by saying, but that's just the way she is. Like, we love her. That's just the way she is. We all know people like that, right? Like, we've probably at one point or another we've said that's just who they are, or we've just given this implication that somebody can be so difficult to deal with that we've just accepted their ways and we don't expect them to change. And Jason talked about this with our teens, and we're going to dive into this for just a few minutes this morning. And my promise is I'm going to try to be quicker than what we are on a normal Sunday, because I know the video took a little bit of time. But here's the spoiler alert. as we talk about this and as we dive into this morning, Jason said that he didn't like this, and I think I could make a strong argument that the accepting of just saying that somebody is just the way they are and we don't expect them to change is not the life that God desires for us to live. You could probably even say it's not biblical. I want to give you 3 quick points this morning. The first one is simply this. And this is what we have been trying to get our teens to understand, and this is what I want us to understand this morning. We're made for more than where we started. Joel spoke on this topic on Sunday morning at camp, and I'm not going to share anything that he shared about, but I can tell you that he did an absolutely fantastic job. The kids, they were laser focused. On the last morning of camp, you're usually tired and you're fighting to stay awake. Maybe looking forward to getting home, and our students were just locked in and engaged with what Joel had to say. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 5:17, he says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, they are a new creation. The new creation has come, the old is gone, the new is here." One of the things I want us to understand this morning is this, and these points are going to be short, and we're going to run through these quickly, but simply this: coming to Christ is not the finish line. If we desire to live a life where we say, "I want to be made for more," which was what our theme was, we have to understand that coming to Christ is not a finish line, it is a starting line. We have to also understand that God doesn't just save us to forgive us, He saves us to transform us. There's a problem, though, and I think the world wants us to understand or believe that this is a lie and that God doesn't want anything to do with us. When I spoke on this theme of Made for More a few months ago, when I had the chance to speak on a Sunday morning, we talked about the life of Moses. And I don't expect anybody to remember what I talked about. But we talked about the 3 women who were important in his early upbringing in his life. And I want us to consider the life of Moses, not in the upbringing of his life, but now when he is later in life and when God is calling Moses to go back to Egypt and to free the Israelites from slavery. Do you remember the conversations that's taking place? And if you don't, I'll just give you just a quick glimpse of them. In Exodus chapters 3 and 4, Moses is having a conversation with God, and he's saying things like this: "God, who am I? Who should I say you are? What if they won't believe me?" Or more direct, "God, they won't believe me," or "I'm not good at this," or "Please send someone else." It's almost as if Moses is looking at God and he's saying, "This is just the way I am. I can't be used for your glory. This is just the way that you've created me, so let's just settle with who I am." It's my belief that if we're still using the same attitudes, the same habits, the same language from before we became a Christian, after we're a Christian, then we're missing out on who God has created us to be. The second point that I want to just hit on briefly this morning is that being like Christ is the goal, not comfort. Paul writes to the church in Ephesus in chapter 4, starting in verse 22, he says, "You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness." If we desire to be made for more, we need to understand that holiness is not optional, that it should be the work of the Spirit in every believer. That we have to set aside the excuses that we make, that this is how I was raised or that's how they've always been. That might be true, but that's not how we have to stay. As I was going through this and pulling up and finding the scripture that I was going to use, it just kind of hit me that all 3 scriptures, the 2 that we've already talked about, the 2 Corinthians and Ephesians, and then the one that we'll talk about in just a moment, we'll talk about one out of Philippians. It's Paul that is writing every single one of these. And if we look at the life of Paul, Paul was climbing the ladder of success in the secular world. He's becoming greater than everybody else, and he's doing so quicker, and yet it is him that is writing about this desire to be made for more, this desire to live a life that looks more like Jesus and less like Paul. In Matthew 23, verse 27, Jesus warns about us not being hypocritical, and the world that we live in is telling us that we should be people who are climbing the ladder for success and becoming as great as we possibly can. Jesus says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of dead and everything unclean." So this is what the world says. You've heard it. The world says that you should keep up with the Joneses, that everything should look good on the outside, and on the inside, whatever it looks like on the inside, that's just for you. Nobody else needs to worry about that. It's my belief that authentic Christianity isn't this idea of faking it until you make it. Authentic Christianity is looking more like Jesus and letting that be the only thing that defines you. I'll give you one more just quick point. And the final point for this morning: growth is a proof of life. Paul writes to the church in Philippians 3:12 through 14. He says, "Not that I've already obtained all this or have already arrived at my goal, but I press on to take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me." In reading this and looking at the life of Paul, we see that Paul never claims to arrive. He just refuses to stay stuck. He understands that spiritual growth is a journey and it's not optional. And he understands that you don't have to be perfect, but you have to press on. One of the things that we want our teens to understand, and listen, I believe that our teens are grasping this, is that they're made for more than excuses, that they're made for more than stagnation. They're made for more than what others expect of them. They're made for more than what they've settled for. They're made to look like Jesus. This past weekend, we took our family, Rachel and I, took the kids, and we just had a quick little getaway. The busyness of summer kind of slowed down just enough for us to be able to get away for about 30 hours, and we took a quick trip down to Hocking Hills and had a blast and spent some time just hiking. And then on Sunday we went to a ziplining place called, I think it was called Valley Ziplining Tours or something like that. It was awesome. It was so much fun. You had about 9 different zip lines that you would go on, but if I'm being 100% honest, there was a little bit of me that was just a little bit nervous because as I get older, for some reason, I just don't like heights as much as I used to. And I was a little bit nervous, but the youngest one in my family she was a little bit nervous as well. She didn't know I was going to talk about her back there. She was a little bit nervous, more nervous than the rest of us. And we get there, and they teach us everything you have to do. You know, they put on the everything that you have to wear, and they teach you the proper way to slow yourself down and how to go in. And the first 5 zip lines they're not bad. They're like 15 feet in the air, and they might be 100 feet long at most. And you go kind of just from canopy to canopy, and eventually back down to the ground. And then you get to the 6th one, and you climb up, and I think they said it was 30 feet in the air. And I do remember I was a little bit nervous because you're not hooked up to climb up to this one. But I'm watching my kids go before me, and I'm like, oh man, I'm starting to get even more nervous just watching them go up there. When you got to the other side of it, you weren't just 30 feet up in the air. And now the hill kind of dropped off, and eventually as soon as you left that platform, you were over 100 feet in the air. And you couldn't see, this was the first one that you couldn't see the end. You were going to leave that tree line, you were going to go over a pond, and you were going to come into another tree line. And I got thinking as I was preparing for this, and I was just kind of thinking back to the weekend that we had and the fun that we had. Can you imagine if we would have just stood on that platform, and if I would have looked at the guides that were there with me and said, you know what, I've had a lot of fun. The first 5 were cool, but this one's a lot bigger. I'm just cool staying right here. The rest of my family can go. The other 4 that were in our group, they can go, but I'm just keep me clipped in right here. The next one, after we did that one, if you had a little bit of size to you, like me and one other guy in the group, you could get up to about 40 miles an hour, and you could skim the top of the pond. But what if I would have said, well, that sounds like fun, but you're inviting me into something that I just don't know yet, but no, I'll just keep me clipped in here. If we start to look at the parallels between that and the life that God is inviting us into, sure, we could stay clipped into the tree, we could stay on the platform, but why stand on that platform when God creates us to live a life that's so much more? where we could jump and we could soar and we could experience something that just brings a smile to your face the entire time. That's what God is inviting us into. I was scrolling through Instagram Reels this week with. You feel guilty when you sit up here and say that, but I was, what do they call that, doom scrolling? And I came across a video, and it caught my attention. And I listened to it, and then I scrolled through a couple more, and then I went back and I listened to it again. And I'll say this: when I was in college and even high school, I was taught how to quote and give credit, where credit is due. I'm still learning how to give credit where credit is due on these Instagram Reels or TikTok videos or Facebook Reels or whatever you would call them. But let me just share. I went back through and I wrote this down. Let me just share what this person said. They said there was a group of women that was doing a study on the book of Malachi. They came up on the third verse in the third chapter, and it puzzled them. It starts by saying this: he will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. The author or the person that was narrating this little video said one of the women decided to do just a little bit more investigating on what the process of refining silver looked like. The woman called up a silversmith and asked if she could come and watch him. She didn't mention why she wanted to go watch him. She just said she was curious about the process. He agreed, and as she came, she watched as he held a piece of silver over the fire and he began to let it heat up. He explained to her that one needed to hold the piece in the middle of the fire where the flames were the hottest, as to burn all the impurities away. They said the woman thought about God holding us in such a hot spot. Then she thought again about the verse. He sits as a refiner. So she asked the silversmith if he had to sit there in front of the fire the entire time. He said not only must he sit there, but he must keep his eye on it the entire time, because if he left for even a moment and left it too long, it would be damaged. Then she asked, well, how do you know when the silver is fully refined? He answered, that's the easiest question you've asked. He said, when I see my image in it. So we are trying to get our teens to understand that we are made for more than what this world has to offer. We are made to live a life that looks like Jesus. And I love this as I was reading this. It is my hope, or as I was listening to this, it is my hope that when people see me, they don't see Tyler or this little guy who used to run around Meadowview and 2nd Street Church of Christ. They see Jesus in me. I listen to the same podcast every Monday. And they have on different people that they interview every week. And so this past Monday, I turned this podcast on and I started to listen to it. And this week, they had a man on by the name of Eddie Penny. Eddie had a unique story. Straight out of high school, he went into the Marines. And after his 4 years in the Marines were up, he decided to go to the Navy. And while in the Navy, he ended up joining and becoming a Navy SEAL, and eventually kind of topped out of serving on SEAL Team 6. But he wasn't on there to talk about that. He started to share part of his story, and he was married. He had 3 kids. I think, if I remember correctly, their ages were 6, 3, and I remember for sure the youngest one was 10 months old. And he and his wife ended up splitting up, and the decision was she was going to take the kids, and he would go on tour, and when he would come home, he would visit the kids as much as he could, and things didn't go as planned. Eventually, it got to the point where in the midst of being a Navy SEAL, he gets a call from a judge and said, come pick your kids up. And he ends up being being a single dad of a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 10-month-old. And he goes on and he shares in here. He said, I knew how to go hang out with the guys and to go to go off to war, but he said, I didn't know how to take care of my own kids. And I'm sure that there were conversations that he had with God that went something like this: God, this is not who I was made to be. God, I was made for so much more than this. Now I'm changing diapers. I used to be this, and now I'm changing diapers and I'm up all night long, and I'm sure there were a lot of questions. But one of the things he said in talking about this, he said, I look back to my life in SEAL training. He said, day 1, I look at my knowledge base. He said, not much there. 30 days in, 60 days in, 90 days in. He said finally 6 months into being done, he said each day, each step, I'm learning so much more. I'm getting stronger, but he said I'm also getting beat down. I'm getting cold, I'm getting wet, I'm getting sandy. He said I'm learning things. I'm learning how to use firearms. I'm learning how to use explosives. He said, and eventually you get morphed into this operator. And then he says this. He said the Lord is doing the same thing with us spiritually, if we're willing. This is what we desire for our youth. This is what I desire for my life, a life where if I look back over my life and say, when I first started learning about what God desired for me, I can look at my life 30 days in, 60 days in. I can realize that 6 months in, 6 years in, whatever it is, I'm learning so much. I'm getting stronger. I'm getting beat down. You know, I have the opportunity to work with teens, and I could tell you a lot of great stories of what God is doing in our teens' lives, and then I could tell you a lot of stories about where you just want to look at the kids and shake them because you want to say, why did you do this? And this is the story of all of our lives, because we could say, I'm getting stronger, but I'm getting beat down. I'm getting cold. I'm getting wet. I'm getting sandy. But he said, before you know it, you're getting morphed into an operator, and this is what God is doing with us spiritually if we are willing. I think the greatest thing I learned at camp is that we have a group of teenagers here, a group of young people who desire to be made for more. But this theme of being made for more is tricky. Being made for what? We can open our Bibles to Hebrews 11, and I encourage you to read it at some point in time, and you could read about the heroes of the faith who you could say that they desired to be made for more and lived a life that was made for more. But the Hebrews 11 tells us that some of the heroes of our faith, they died without ever receiving an earthly reward. But they lived trusting in God's promise. They lived with faith. My question to you as we wrap this up, and I'm going to go ahead and invite Dad and Dickie to come back up here as we prepare for a time of invitation. My question is this: are we willing to trust in those same promises that these heroes of our faith did that we read about in Hebrews 11? Are we willing to be people who are transformed into the likeness of Christ? Are we willing to shed that's just how I was created image and instead bear the image of Christ? We do so through being obedient through baptism. This idea that we are going to die to our old self, be buried in the watery grave, and rise new in Christ Jesus. A new creation, striving each day to look less like our old self and more like Jesus. I can't encourage you enough. Ask our teens what God is doing in their lives. Ask the ones who stood up what they are learning, what they have learned, and how they are desiring to be made for more. I learned that we have some amazing teens here who desire to live a life that is honoring of God. My question for us is do we desire to live that same life?